Thanks. Hi, I'm Madison Ghiz. I'm a solar energy analyst at DNV. And I'm just one of many who has worked on this solar energy assessment validation using SolarFarmer. The SolarFarmer team has been really key to that as well, so as you saw Tony earlier. So the agenda today, I'll talk to you a little bit about our objectives. It's a brief introduction to SolarFarmer and kind of why we're transitioning. An overview of our energy assessment validation process and how we get to the numbers that I'll show you, as well as some past energy assessment validation work, and then I'll focus mostly on the current energy assessment validation work with some conclusions and where we plan to go from here. So we want to be validating our energy assessment methodologies every year. To do this helps with lowering our risk, decreasing uncertainty, as well as increasing the confidence in ourselves as well as investors. And so, like I said, the main difference here in this validation is that we've rerun our validation process using SolarFarmer instead of PVSys in our energy assessment methods. So like you saw earlier, SolarFarmer is a software. It combines thoroughly validated PV simulation algorithms with a really awesome interface. It allows quick and easy configuration of these PV plants and designs. But one of the main reasons that we're transitioning to SolarFarmer is that we need something that we can scale. So as solar energy demand increases, we need something that we can increase alongside that. One of the great things is that it's really programmable, so the backend is totally available to us. All of the algorithms are really transparent and usually publicly available, as they're used in PVlib pretty widely as well. And then a really big thing is the API access. So this allows us to really efficiently run a lot of projects through batch processing, which will be really important for that scalability. There it goes. So just a high-level view kind of our process for the EA validation methodology. We first want to gather our production data, so we gather that from the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, and if available, we also collect project owner-provided data. So in some of our validations, you'll see that we have availability and curtailment data. We then run our pre-construction energy assessment on our side. So something to note here, and I'll also touch on it later, is that we run our energy assessment using PVSys or SolarFarmer up into the inverter output, where we then apply our own post-processing currently. So then we adjust this actual production that we've collected with an irradiance correction. We do this because we're using a TMY in our energy assessments, and we want to account for the variance that we see on site for these specific projects. So we collect historical irradiation data, use that equation there to get an irradiance correlation, and then apply that to the production data. For the first two validations, the past validations that I'll show from 2019 and 2020, we've used Sunspot for this data, but the most recent ones we've used Vaisala version 2.1. So then finally, we look at a performance index to compare kind of any discrepancies in our modeling process. So we compare the actual irradiance corrected production data and then our own pre-construction estimates. Nope. So a look at some of our past EA validation work. In 2019, we had a sample size of 67 project years. This was 39 different projects, all utility scale across the US. Something to note for all of these validations, the projects are all monofacial, and they're all fixed tilt and tracker, so they're a combination. Here, also for the 2019 validation, we have no loss factor adjustments yet here, and so we saw a median performance index of 96.4%. So that shows that DNV is over-predicting energy assessments by 3.6% here, with a standard deviation of 5.4%. So then in the 2019 validation addendum, we had the same project set of data, and we just applied our loss factor adjustments. So we applied our complex terrain losses, our hourly modeling correction methodology, and then tracker wind stow losses. And this increased the median performance index to 97.5%. So you see us over-predicting here by 2.5%, but we saw a significant drop in the standard deviation to 3.3%. Something that's notable here is that we realized we needed availability and curtailment data to truly categorize and identify the differences. And so that was the main purpose of the 2021 validation, is when So we actually used 13 utility scale projects where we had project owner provided curtailment and availability data in addition to that production data. So that was the main change here. And we just updated any of our methodologies. So for those trackers, for the wind stow, and then also for terrain and hourly modeling correction. And here, this actually boosted our median performance index to 100.3. So we're actually under predicting by 0.3% with this validation, and a slight drop in the standard deviation to 3.2%. And then our current validation, the 2021 validation addendum, we're using the same set of projects, but we have a little bit more production data that we found, or that was available to us. We've updated our methodologies, but then, like I said, the main difference here was that we're using SolarFarmer in our energy assessment instead of PVSys as the modeling software. And so that produced a 99.9% median performance index. So you can see that dropped by about 0.4% from the previous validation. And our standard deviation range also decreased to 2.3%. So I kind of gave you the background on all of the validations. So I will just kind of briefly go through these figures, but I think it's a nice way to look at the distribution and kind of the range and see as we progress with our validations each year, we see the median shifting closer to 100 as well as the range kind of decreasing. So on the y-axis, we have project years, and then the x, we have performance indexes. And so this one is for our 2019 EA validation, where the PI median was 96.4. And then with the 2019 addendum validation, you can see it shifted slightly, but we still don't have that availability and curtailment data. So this is where the PI median was 97.5. Here we have the 2021 EA validation. That median has shifted significantly towards kind of the middle here. You can see it becoming a little bit more normal, and this is where we've incorporated our availability and our curtailment data. And then finally, in our 2021 EA validation, this is the result we have now. And that dotted line just is indicating the PI median, if I didn't say that before. But here we have the 99.9%. So here DNV is just over-predicting by 0.1% in comparison to the actual production data. And so I think this is just a really good figure, just to touch on kind of, it shows a little bit of like a timeline from where we started in 2019 and where we've kind of ended up, and the contributions of each loss factor adjustment. So on the y-axis, you'll see, so this is actually the mean performance index instead of the median this time, and it's weighted by operational years. And on the x-axis, you'll see on the left hand, we have the 2019 EA validation pre-loss factor adjustments before any updates using PVSys in our energy assessment. And then on the far right side, you'll see the current results. So you'll see that mean PI for the energy assessment validation addendum from 2021 after all of our updates and using SolarFarmer in the energy assessment. So here you can see curtailment contributed about 1.2%, so that was a really significant addition. It was really important for us to get that data. The availability is about, can't read that from here, 0.6%. Hourly modeling correction contributed almost 1% at 0.9, and then terrain was at 1.4%, so that was also very significant. We found that wind stow impact from trackers really had a negligible impact at actually it was less than 0.1%, but I think this just tells like kind of a nice story of how each has influenced our performance index. So here is a really great example of kind of what we're planning to do, but this is a real world example. So here is an energy assessment using SolarFarmer versus an energy assessment using PVSys. And so this project called for a base case energy assessment with different variations for specific parameters. So we varied the module type, module bifaciality, we varied inverter type, ground tilt, bifaciality factor, as well as albedo. So this resulted in 18 different energy assessments that we had run in parallel. And on the kind of bottom here, you see this figure where it is comparing SolarFarmer and PVSys. So the x-axis here is the SolarFarmer minus PVSys divided by PVSys, so it's all in reference. And then the number of projects or EAs run on the y-axis. And so the numbers that we got from this specific project, we found a mean of about 0.06%. Our median was 0.17%. And then our range from minimum to maximum was about -0.4 to 0.5%. I also think something important to point out here is this kind of like rectangle on the left side, those couple of projects. And I believe, so these are our projects where we have increased bifaciality, and so bifaciality is a bit higher. So that's why those are kind of skewed out. And in the next slide or two, I have a kind of loss tree comparison where you'll see that more explicitly. So I realize now this is difficult to see all of these numbers, but I will explain what you're looking at. So on the top row are all of our different variations of that energy assessment for that project. And just kind of, it's titled pretty generically just with what was changed for each to anonymize it. And then on the left side, you'll see a typical PVSys loss tree, all the loss tree factors there. One really great thing about SolarFarmer is that it has a PVSys-like output, so we're able to compare apples to apples here. And then on the bottom, you'll see our year one generation. And so it ranges the scale. Looking at it now, it would have been nice to have added a scale on this, so I apologize. But the blue is so, well, actually, let me first say that all of these numbers are SolarFarmer minus PVSys. And so when you see that, for example, on the top, the POA has about a negative 0.1%, because they are all percent comparisons, so we can just subtract one from the other. But I think it is really important to note a couple things here. One is that these aren't errors necessarily, they're just differences in the modeling. And another thing that is really cool to see, and what we expect, so this is good to see, is that it's pretty uniform across all of the energy assessments, how much they're changing or how much difference is in the modeling. And so, like I pointed out the very first row, which is that POA, you see a negative 0.1% gain for SolarFarmer because it is that negative number. And then those blocks that I pointed out in the previous slide with that figure were from the projects with higher bifaciality. And so you can see that there, about two columns in, that darker red value, if you can't read that, that is the bifaciality that we're seeing there. So I won't go into everything on this, but it's just kind of a look into how we're approaching validation and how we plan to run our energy assessments with PVSys and our energy assessments with SolarFarmer side by side. Yeah, and so in conclusion, it was pretty straightforward. The median performance index was reduced by 0.4% from our 2021 EA validation. So we saw that 100.3% performance index, which was showing that we are under predicting by 0.3%. So now we are over predicting by 0.1% with our 99.9% median performance index. Our standard deviation reduced from 3.2% to 2.3%. So we really like to see that distribution decreasing. And kind of like I said, that tighter distribution with that smaller performance index, it gives us the confidence, and hopefully we can continue to build on this, but to use SolarFarmer exclusively in our energy assessments. And then just some future work. Like I said, we want to build our confidence in SolarFarmer as a bankable tool. We want to continue running SolarFarmer in parallel with PVSys and continue these loss tree comparisons. Eventually, we would like to incorporate SolarFarmer sub-hourly and complex terrain capabilities, like Tony was talking about earlier. We currently, like I said, we're only looking at the energy assessment, the modeling software up into the inverter output. So we currently have our own post-processing, but plan to adapt these. And then we would like to continue, obviously, the energy assessment validations as we move along. So we would like to increase the number of projects. We only looked at 13 projects with that availability and curtailment data. So any projects with that granularity of data, we'd love to increase that number. We would also like to increase the diversity geographically and meteorologically of the projects to get a better sense of this, as well as add more bifacial projects. So I didn't show any bifacial projects here. The SolarFarmer team has actually run some that will be shown in the white paper that we're coming out with for this, but they were not presented in this one. And then additionally, we would like to automate our validation process. So since we are talking about scaling and increasing our numbers, it would be really great to be able to automate this so we can validate more frequently and improve our methodologies in general. And then, like I said, DNV would like to move to exclusively using SolarFarmer in our energy assessments. So that's more of our short-term goal. But yeah, that is our plans for future work. I think that's all. Thank you.